born in Texas, but when I was 2, my mom sent me to live with her parents. She was still too young to raise a kid on her own and needed to save money for us for a better future. My grandparents lived in a desert region north of central Mexico, in a small village 2 hours away from a very large city called San Luis Potosi. I was 4 years old back in 1987. By this time, I thought my grandparents were my actual parents. By then, I didn't remember my actual mom since I had not seen her since I was 2 years old. One day in 1987, my grandparents decided to go to the city of San Luis to run some errands and do shopping. This is something they would do frequently, and they would always take me with them. San Luis Potosi is a typical large city in Mexico with a slightly concerning crime rate, especially back in the 1980s. When we got there, we would go to a location called El Centro, a very large historic paved plaza with shops, cafes, basilicas, and conquistador buildings older than 300 years. It's a very famous and very busy area, but rumored to be dangerous for the naive tourist. That's what I remember. We were walking to a shoe shop where shoes are handmade. As we were in the store, I was eyeing a candy store just across from the shoe shop. My grandparents were distracted. I decided to run to the enticing candy store to look at a colorful arrangement of chocolates and gummies. My grandparents, unfortunately, did not notice me walking out of the store. As I walked to the candy store, I was in there for a minute and quickly lost my enthusiasm. I started feeling lost, so I started making my way back to the shoe shop to meet my grandparents. As I exited the store, I felt someone grab me very fast. It was an aggressive snatch. My mouth was being covered by a dirty hand that felt like some construction worker. I couldn't yell. I started crying, but this person was strong, too strong. They forced my mouth shut, and when I looked behind me immediately, I was being grabbed by 2 large men. It all happened so fast. I was way too small to fight them, and they carried me to a van parked close by and tossed me in the back while one drove and one sat with me in the back to restrain me. They told me to stay quiet or they would kill me. One of them pulled a knife and showed it to me. I was too scared to scream at this point. I don't remember too much on this ride, wherever they were taking me, other than it was a quiet ride. They didn't speak to me unless it was to give me orders or tell me to shut up. I didn't even hear them speak to each other. The thing I mostly remember is how terrified I was because I had seen this in movies. I was driven to a house that appeared to have 2 bedrooms. When I arrived, there was a woman there who appeared to be their accomplice. I was kept in a room with a bed and a drawer. It was during this time I was told by the woman and the 2 men why they brought me here. They said they're gonna sell me to some people who are willing to pay lots of money for me to kill me, then dissect me to sell my organs to the black market. Apparently they were part of a very large underground network. The woman and kidnappers were very mean and short-tempered. At times they went as far as beating me. That happened 2 times when I couldn't stop crying. They were overly paranoid about the neighbors hearing or seeing anything suspicious. Out of the 3 of them, the woman was the most disturbed. She did most of the talking. They told me horrific crimes they've committed before to keep me in compliance. I won't disclose most of them because it makes me uncomfortable. But one thing I remember the woman told me is that she hated all children in general, every last one of them. She thought they were a nuisance. Being a part of this gave her genuine pleasure. This was by far the most traumatic time in my life. I'm still discovering today how this incident fractured my 4-year-old mind. I was kept in this room for what felt like 2 days with no food. I was only given water. I was incredibly fortunate though. On that second day, these 3 people were raided by the local police and all arrested. I was safely returned to my grandparents. However, after this happened, my grandparents and I never spoke of this event again. A week before I turned 7 years old, my granddad died of natural causes. After my grandpa's death, my biological mother showed up in my life for the first time at my grandmother's house to attend my grandfather's funeral. It was at this time that she decided it was time to take me with her and introduce me to the country I was born in, the United States. I don't believe my grandparents ever told my mom of my kidnapping. Today, I'm an adult man in my 30s. I've never talked to my mom about this, nor has she ever asked me. We have a very distant mother-son relationship. I have every reason to believe she has no clue at all that this happened. It's possible that my grandparents deliberately kept this from her to avoid causing her stress. My grandmother passed away in 2013, taking this unspoken memory with her. When I was 12, my dad would often take me to the grocery store, wait in the parking lot, and have me do the shopping in order for me to build independence. That's why I was alone at the time. The day it happened, I entered the store as usual, roaming the aisles and occasionally dropping items into my cart. Everything was normal until I noticed a man was following me around the store. It shouldn't have been too alarming, but for me as a kid with no cell phone and no way to contact my parents, it got a lot more terrifying than I suppose it would have been for an adult. Fortunately, my suspicions were confirmed when I circled the same aisle 3 times and he was right behind me each time. It was getting kind of late. A lot of the customers had already left the store with their groceries. The store slowly became more desolate, more empty, and my fear began to skyrocket. Desperate to get to my dad and away from this man, I sped to checkout. I should have just booked it out of the store then, but I desperately wanted to stand my ground to prove myself capable to my dad and get the groceries I came for. I went to a checkout and started scanning, attempting to maintain my composure. I had started to convince myself that I was overreacting and just being paranoid when the man came up to me. He said hi to me in a cheery voice, then he said, "I couldn't help but wonder why such a young boy like you is here alone. You must be a brave boy." I stumbled over my words, but I couldn't speak. I was so terrified. "I'm not here alone. My dad is here." "Is he? I didn't see him with you."
"He's in the bathroom."
God, I sucked at lying. The man crouched down and got to eye level with me. "Tell you what, I'll pay for your groceries and give you a ride home. How does that sound?" Alarm bells went off in my head. Everything my mother had drilled into my head about not going with strangers was screaming at me. I froze.
I have a ride. Thanks for offering, though, and I can pay for the groceries."
Throughout this conversation, I was quickly scanning the groceries as fast as I could. I finished up and was about to pay for the groceries when the man smiled maliciously at me, swept my hand aside, and said, "No trouble, I'll pay." He put his card into the machine, it accepted the payment, and he took my hand along with the groceries. "Now come on, let's go." The second his cold, bony hand took mine, my instincts kicked in. I squirmed out of his grip and sprinted out of the grocery store without the groceries. As soon as I was in the parking lot, I started screaming at the top of my lungs and ran as fast as I could to my dad's car. He opened the door, put out a cigarette, and started calming me down, asking me what happened. At this point, I was full on crying and tears ran down my cheeks as I told him what happened. My dad wanted to go confront the man, but I was so scared, I just begged him to go home. A couple minutes later, we pulled out of the parking lot and started driving home. To this day, I have no idea why the man didn't pursue me when I ran. If he had, I would have been caught, no question. But to the man who almost abducted me when I was 12, I wish you the worst. The day before it happened, I was enjoying some quality time with my family before they drove me to the airport to go back to college. I had recently turned 21, and my dad was able to get a first-class ticket for me using miles. Needless to say, I was excited to take full advantage of the free drinks on the plane. After passing through security and finding my gate, I boarded the plane and I got settled. 3 gin and tonics later, I landed at about 1 a.m., and I got my bag and waited for my Lyft at the pickup area. The Lyft driver got turned around and went to the wrong location, but I told him where I was and he came around and found me. He apologized and gave me water as a consolation, which I did not drink. As we drove, I just scrolled on TikTok trying to make the time pass, as my roommates were excited for me to return and we were going out to celebrate. Then, about 15 minutes outside of my college's town, my driver pulled over on the side of the highway, put the car in park, and popped the hood of the car. Or at least I thought he did. As he stepped out, I realized he never pressed the button to unlock the hood latch. He was in front of the car looking in with his phone flashlight through the grill, which I thought was odd. He briefly came back in the car and I asked him what was going on. "The car seems to be overheating. I'm not sure what's wrong," he says. I was a bit confused, but I just took his word for it, although I noticed no signs of the car overheating. There was no smoke, the heat gauge didn't seem to indicate anything. Nothing. He went back outside and I called my roommate, T, to let him know what was going on. I told him I was a little sketched out right now and that my Lyft was pulled over on the highway and the driver was claiming his car was overheating. I let him know what exit and mile marker I was by, finishing by saying,
"I don't think anything's actually wrong, but I just want to be safe."
T told me they had already started drinking, so he didn't think he could come pick me up, but he was reassured that at least he knew where I was. As I was on the phone with him, the driver called someone up. I figured he was calling AAA to get a tow truck out there. But then he came back to the car to tell me his brother was coming to pick me up. Now this fully triggered my fight or flight response and I started to panic. I've told my roommates before that a metal water bottle would make a good improvised weapon if you were ever in need of defending yourself, and so I took out my hydro flask from my backpack and held it firmly in my hand. Then I called my mom and quickly explained the situation.
"Mom,
I said shakily,
the Lyft driver pulled over on the side of the highway and is telling me his brother is coming to pick me up because he's having engine trouble. I don't feel safe. I'm not sure what to do."
My mom told me to tell her my location and to stay on the phone with her, which I did. I then got out of the car and asked the driver if he can just drive me over to a nearby business park so I can call a new Lyft. He says, "No need. My brother's on the way. He should be here in 15 minutes. In a cheerful voice that verged on threatening. I say,
"Can I just have my bags then? I'm just gonna walk over there."
He again goes, "Why? I promise my brother is coming. He will take you the rest of the way." I repeat,
"No, it's okay. I'm gonna call a new Lyft. Can you please open the trunk and give me my bag?"
but he kept persisting. "It's my own brother. He will take you the rest of the way." A few more back and forths later, he very reluctantly opened the trunk and I took my bag out and told him fearfully.
"You'll still get paid. I'm just gonna get a new Lyft."
I then sprinted across the highway and a highway on-ramp to get out of there as fast as possible. I turned around to see him angrily talking to someone on the phone and walking back to the driver's seat of the car. I turned back around, jumped down an embankment, over a fence, and into the business park. I stay on the phone with my mom as my dad calls Lyft to report the driver until I get picked up by my new Lyft. As this was happening, I look over to see the car is gone, and I catch a glimpse of my Lyft taking the same on-ramp I had ran across. This all but confirmed my suspicion that he was having no engine trouble whatsoever. Fortunately, there were no more complications after that. As calmly as I could, I rode back to my house and explained what happened to my roommates. I'm not sure if I was overreacting, but I'm glad I erred on the side of caution. The worst part of this whole thing, though, the part that still eats away at me today, is that since he was driving me to my house, this man knows my address.